Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Knowledge Quest's virtual sharings. I am your host, Araba Soon, and I am currently on the Greenleaf Learning Farm, and I'm going to take you through a lesson on composting. Do you know what composting is? Have you ever heard of this before? Do you currently compost, or are you interested in composting yourself? I hope that I'm able to take you through the many reasons and lessons of why you should start composting today. Before we get started, I want to take you through just a brief sharing on what composting is and why it is so important to practice this in your daily life. So, composting is basically the process of taking old produce scraps as well as different food items such as coffee grounds, tea bags, as well as certain grains, and putting them in a specific location such as a bucket or even in a location in your backyard. And basically what it does is that you're able to increase the nutrient value of the soil that you may be able to garden or farm on, as well as it just really takes all of the nutrients that were once in your produce staples that you prepared during the week, and you're able to take that and put it back and give it back rather to Mother Earth, also known as Mother Nature, earth, soil, all of those great things, okay? So I first want to take you through just kind of like the do's and don'ts when it comes to composting, right? So again, composting is the process of just taking different produce scraps and different things that you've consumed throughout your week, whether that is brown paper bags, again, coffee grounds, fruit peelings, green leaves, or any other things that may have spoiled that you were preparing during the week that you were not able to get to in time. It's just a process of being able to take that and give it back to Mother Earth, okay? There's, again, some specific do's and don'ts when it comes to what things that you can and cannot compost. I'm going to take you through this lesson really quickly. It's very easy to remember if you're able to think of it as green material versus brown material, and this is for the do's, okay? So for green material, it can be anything from green leafy produce staples such as collard green stems or kale stems. Let's say you had some spinach in the freezer or the fridge that you weren't able to get to in time, and you pretty much can't consume it now, so you want to also add that to your compost. That would be great. Other green materials can look like grass clippings. It can look like flowers that you may have in your house that are now kind of decaying or dying. You could also add that to your compost for your green materials. Some other green material staples looks like gardening clippings. So like if you're working out in the yard, you got anything but weeds will work best. But say you mow the grass and you have these grass clippings or even hay, different things like that around the yard, you could also add that material. And overall, just produce in general. So any kind of fruit, any type of anything that has to do with fruit or vegetables or any type of herbs, anything that you're not necessarily using or that's no good to prepare now, okay? And I'm going to show you all some specifics, so don't worry there. We're going to go through all the different things that you could also add to your compost bin as well. So the green materials are what you want to add to your compost, and I named a few of those. Some brown materials that you want to be able to add are things such as coffee grounds. If you're a coffee drinker, you can add the filter as well as the actual grounds that you use once you're finished brewing your coffee. You can do brown paper bags. So as long as the bags don't have any type of gloss or any type of chemical synthetic material on top of it, that should be totally fine. Such as like when you go to the grocery store and you go to Kroger, if you go to Aldi and even Whole Foods and they give you those brown paper bags, those will be perfect because it does not have a gloss peeling over it or any type of chemicals on the bag, so that would be a great thing to compost as well. If you work out in the yard a lot, if you do any type of construction work around your house, things like wood chips, sawdust, again, shredded paper. So if you're shredding paper in the house of bills and just different materials or paperwork that you no longer need and you want to get rid of that shred, you could also add that to your compost bin as well. And yeah, and straw and hay. And I mentioned that in the green material, but it also goes for the brown. So basically, when you're thinking of like, okay, so why is this important? It's important because you need the green and the brown material in order to make an effective compost pile. So you want to think of 50% green, 50% brown, okay? So if you're doing this in your backyard, if you have a painter's bucket, that would be great. If you have a little small section in your backyard that you just want to throw these things in, that would be great as well. And you're basically just going to take a shovel of some sort and over time just mix that material up. And what it's going to start to do is it's going to start to break down. That is then called compost. Not dirt, but compost. It's going to be so nutritionally valued for your soil, as well as for you to add to your garden if you're planting anything this season, or if you like, you could always drop it off to your nearest farmer, your nearest farm, or even your nearest garden site. And if you're not into that as well, you could also just have a membership or sign up with Compost Fairy, and I'll leave a little more details about that in the description box below. All right, so let's talk about some don'ts when you're composting. You don't want to do anything that is processed or packaged. So when I say this, sometimes we have produce that is processed or packaged. You don't have to worry about those. Those should be totally fine. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about things like chips, candy, cookies, brownies, anything that's too sugary or that's too salty, dense. You don't want to add those to your compost bucket. You don't want to add any type of meat, so that's not any animal products. Eggs are fine in compost. You can do like you can do like chicken eggs or anything like that. That's totally fine, but not any heavy meat or any heavy grease material, okay? So you don't want to add any chicken, you don't want to add any meat as far as red meat, pork, turkey, bacon, none of that. You want to just throw that in the trash, okay? And the reason why it's important not to add those type of items to your compost, because you don't want to bring on any pests, okay? Pests in the form of raccoons, dogs, or even just an infestation of bugs that are not healthy, or even an infestation of rats. No one wants that. So make sure you keep those out of your compost, okay? Also dairy. You don't want to add any milk to your compost as well, or any cheese either. I mentioned the glossy paper, so if you have brown paper bags, that's fine as long as it doesn't have a gloss over it. As well as you don't want to add any weeds, because what's going to happen is if you start adding weeds to your compost, that is going to start to grow more weeds, and we don't need any weeds in our compost, because again, this is nutritionally dense, this is nutritionally valuable, and we want to specifically add this to our gardening or our farming that we're already in the midst of doing, so it can further enhance the fruits, the vegetables, and anything else that we're growing out there. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're adding certain produce, all type of produce is great for this, but anything that you know for a fact that's been sprayed with any heavy chemicals or pesticides, you want to also prevent from adding those. Sometimes that's a bit hard to know if it is heavily dense with any pesticides or chemicals, but to be on the safe side, just don't worry about that too much, and just add what you can to your compost, and hopefully no pesticides or anything like that is getting into your compost bin. And again, you want to manage this compost mixture by adding this green material and this brown material together. It's going to be 50-50, and you're going to focus on mixing this mix. So it's kind of like when you're cooking or you're baking anything, right? If I'm trying to bake cookies and I don't want it to be overly sweet, I typically add brown sugar as well as maybe a white sugar to really create a mix, a healthy mix between those two materials. So you want to do the same thing with your compost bin. You want to add a healthy amount of the green materials as mentioned, and a healthy amount of your brown materials. And you want to actively turn those, okay? So whether it's in a bucket, a painter's bucket, in which I'll show you here shortly, that one, or whether it's just in your backyard, a corner in your backyard, you want to make sure you're actively mixing that mixture so that it is able to break down properly, and so that it's able to turn into what I like to call black soil, as well as black gold, because it's very much so nutrient dense and very healthy for whatever you're trying to grow in your garden, as well as just your soil overall in your backyard. So keep that in mind. So now let's get into the actual showing of the do's of what we want to add to our compost bucket. I recently did a community composting haul with my neighbors, as well as some things that I had in my refrigerator and my freezer. So I'm going to show you all what I have today. I'm going to bring you a little closer so you can actually see what we have here. Okay, so to start, I do have a compost bucket. This is just a painter's bucket. It's a little filthy, but it's only because it lives outside, so it's really in the elements. You also want to make sure you have a top for that, because you want to keep it closed at all times to ensure that it's breaking down properly. When you keep it outside in the sun is also going to help the process of it breaking down more. And then with the process of you turning it, it's also going to help it to solidify and to really kind of break down into what we need as the black soil, as well as the black gold that I spoke of, aka compost. Okay, so a little bit about what I do in order to prepare myself for my compost. Okay, so I have here this plastic bags that I get from weekly produce drop-offs. Okay, so I keep these bags because they become really helpful when I am composting. I am plant-based vegan, meaning I don't consume any animal products or anything, so I eat a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of vegetables, fruits, herbs, right? So therefore, I have a lot of compost. So if you can see this bag over here, you can see that I have a lot that I pretty much have to compost every other day, sometimes just every 2 or 3 days, or even just every week. So I keep these in order to add my produce scraps to during the week. And what I personally do is that I add it to the freezer. So I have this bag in the freezer, and every time I make a kale salad and I have the stems left over, I would add it to this bag. If I'm making roasted carrots, I would shred the carrots, maybe take off the first layer. I would add the first layer to this bag. If I have, say, some leftovers and it was some type of quinoa or brown rice or some type of grain that I was cooking, but I didn't get to it in time before it spoiled, I would add it to this bag. And I would add this into the freezer because what it does is it freezes it instantly, and then it's able to preserve it, so there's not an odor that's being created in my fridge. And it makes it super easy for me when this bag fills up and I want to just bring it downstairs and add it to this compost bucket. It's easy to do that without any hassle of having to go back and forth and just creating a big mess in my fridge. Okay, so keep that in mind to keep some type of plastic bag. It could also be in the form of this. I also have a bucket that I use, and as you can see, there's some staples in there that I'm going to be composting, but even a bucket would suffice. Any type of container, closed container will work. If you're doing it in the fridge first and then transferring it to the freezer, I would suggest making sure the lid closes on the one that you add to the fridge, because as you may know, things will start to spoil over time in the refrigerator, but when you have something that it can close tight in, it will prevent from it spoiling or smelling bad. And then if you can just add that to your freezer, it would just solidify it at that point and you won't have to worry about it. Okay, so make sure you have a bag present. Make sure you have your bucket, and this bucket, if you like to have a closed, a larger container for that. And also I do these as well, little sandwich bags. So this was some peppers that I didn't get to in time, and then this is some peelings off of a cucumber and some green onions. So I just added it to this bag so I can just open this bag up, dump it in there. And what I do is I typically keep these and just rinse them out, and then I use these only for composting in, right? I don't use them for storing my main vegetables, but I do use these in order to have them ready if I need them. Okay, so I'm going to show you all really quickly So I'm gonna put some gloves on for this because some of this is starting to thaw out due to the sun. It's such a beautiful day in South Memphis. I'm gonna put these gloves on, and I would just start adding these to my bucket here, okay? So this is just a tomato, and there's some peppers, and sometimes these are things that I didn't necessarily get to in time, which happens, right? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it's just peelings of things. Sometimes it's the core of peaches of some sort, or it's things like kale stems, right? Like no one eats the kale stems. You can eat them. I have ate them before and just saute them with some sea salt and pepper and a little soy sauce. But I'm going to add this in. Also, I have in here, just to show y'all really quickly, it's just the peelings from the red onions, right? So you're going to add these in. So you can really create a lot of compost just based off of like leftovers of produce scraps, right? This is some peelings of the cabbage that I always take off the first layer of cabbage when I'm preparing cabbage. So that's just this, and then it's a couple of green onions peelings as well. Add this into here. We don't compost plastic unless it's compost friendly. These plastics aren't, so I'll just throw those in the recycling and have those processed differently than my compost here. So here are the carrots that I was speaking of earlier. So I just add this to that bag. And I'm going to add the bag to the compost. This is just a brown paper bag that my produce came in when I went to the farmer's market. So I'll add this in as well. And then this is just a lot of fruit. Also it's tomatoes, and I think it's a couple of plums that I didn't get to. I will share that when you have produce that you haven't got to in time, and anytime it has a sticker on it, you definitely want to take that off. So you don't want to add that in if you can help it. Sometimes some sneak in, and that's okay. But if you can prevent it, just take those off ahead of time. And I also have like lemon peelings as well as a couple of orange peelings too. These are some leftover microgreens that I let sit for too long, so I'm going to add those in as well. And this plastic is actually compostable from Old World Farms. And then this is the basket of produce that I was sharing. So this is just some peelings that were left over from preparing food for probably a week or two. So I have a lot to get rid of, but as you can see, there's some avocados in here. There's some peelings in there or stickers that I need to take off really quickly. And yeah, I would just dump this in there. I'm going to take these stickers off really quick. And the only difference that I would share is that this compost bin is going to be a tad bit different because this is the farm here, and I really usually just fill this bucket up and take it right over to the farm because they already have the other mixture of brown materials such as brown paper bags, hay, grass clippings, or any other wood chips and things like that that needs to be mixed within it. So I wanted to share that just in case you're wondering, where's the 50-50 at? So I let Theo, the farm manager, take care of the rest for me, and I just make sure that I give him some of my compost and produce staples that I have during the week to make that happen, okay? And in this bag is some more staple things that our community wasn't able to get rid of, and so therefore I'm going to also add that to our compost pile. As you can see, I'm already pretty full here really quickly, and yeah, that is the compost lesson. I trust that you all will start to incorporate this into your daily, your weekly regimen. It's very useful for our environment. Instead of it going to a landfill like most of our produce and just trash, plastics, and what have you, most of those things go there. And so if you can do your daily dose of assisting with just composting your own materials and just giving it back to Mother Earth very naturally, very organically, it would really improve our food systems. It would improve the nutrient value of our produce depending on where we're consuming, right? If you all don't know, I am a lover of all things local, so I would encourage you all as well to shop locally and just be more intentional about being more eco-friendly, more green, specifically about composting if you can start there. I hope you all enjoyed this lesson, and I will look forward to sharing with you all again soon. Bye.